Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagenow. Welcome back to another action-packed, fun-filled episode of the gold standard in Iowa conservative podcasting. We're joined here in studio with John Hendrickson and Chris Ingstad and myself. It is winter is no longer coming. Winter is here. And it's a beautiful day outside, and it's our internet's working inside, and we can do this. We're at full strength today. So, gentlemen, we've got a lot of little things to cover today, and I want to start off with our regular feature, which we don't actually have to show you today. But, John, what did you get in the mail? What's your most recent addition to the collection?
And then tell us why you don't understand how regular features work. You can't take the bit home with you.
I'm not sure what that means, but I did get expanding my collection of Hoover posters.
Yeah,
a 1928 campaign poster and it's a drawing of Herbert Hoover and his vice president Charles Curtis, who was from Oklahoma.
Interesting. I did not know that.
And he was part Cherokee, so technically he was the first Native American to serve as vice president, Charles Curtis.
Fascinating.
And so the posters from 1928 of Herbert Hoover, and so it's going to go to my collection.
Maybe we can get a visual of that somehow, Chris, although we've deprived the listener and the viewer.
It'll certainly be up on for our viewers on YouTube. I'll have it up there so you can take a look at it. And it's good stuff. John's stuff's all great.
I have to surround myself with things from the 1920s because that's, I think, the best example of conservatism.
Well, we've explored that a little bit in the past, so it'd kind of be fun to do it again, of what limited government conservatism actually looks like. So we'll get back to the unwrapping when John gets a little more up to speed on what a regular feature actually looks like here. So, John, going back to you, I kind of cut you off at the end of the last episode. We were debriefing the election, and I want to pick up that theme again because that's what's still most of what's going on in the political world is what did we learn in this election? I mean, anybody can tell us what the balance of power is going to be in Iowa or in Congress, but what you had some thoughts on some takeaways of what you saw from this most recent election results.
Yeah, and I think one important point is that these results have shown us that this election reflected really that policy making is working in the states versus the federal government. The federal government has, and I would argue, has failed pretty much in terms of effective policy. In fact, made things worse. But if we look at, for example, Florida, Iowa, even Ohio, Governor Reynolds, Governor DeWine of Ohio, Governor DeSantis were all reelected easily, and each of them have made substantial policy reforms in their states. We've talked a number of policy reforms that Governor Reynolds has done. Same with Governor DeSantis, and Governor DeWine has done the same thing. And we can also see other states that have, engaged in really bad policy as well. But I think what we're seeing here is an active, pretty aggressive level of policy making at the state level that's actually working and influencing people, and it's sort of what the founders had wanted.
John, you highlighted conservative governors with election success and good conservative records in their states. In fact, people giving them a mandate to do just that, and I know you may want to cover that later. But the reverse of that's true a little bit too. Weren't there governors in blue states who won re-election? The people in those states apparently wanted more of that, or more of that style.
Yeah.
And while we may disagree with that, or we don't like that, even we have to admit, if that's what the people want and they vote, then so be it. And back to your point about what the founding fathers wanted, they wanted those decisions to be made at the state level and delivered by the states. So red or blue, right, conservative, progressive, however you want to think about it, I mean, that part of the system is working.
You're absolutely right.
Now, we can talk about, I think, folks on all sides may want to toss D.C. out of there.
Look at two of our neighbors. Minnesota reelected Governor Tim Walz. In Illinois, it's Pritzker. Yeah, Pritzker got reelected. Both are very progressive, liberal, and have, I would say, examples of poor public policies. But, the people
have spoken.
The people have spoken in those states. But
apparently they're just fine with lots of crime.
I think one thing, though, when I'm highlighting the 3 red states because I think it's an example of where Republicans are getting things right. And I think that's one lesson from this election is that at the national level, Republicans have been good at opposing President Biden's agenda, but they haven't been good at offering solutions. And what we saw from Governor Reynolds, I think Governor DeWine and DeSantis, and some other Republican governors is they're actually giving people solutions. And I think that's a big difference.
I think that's a great point. And something I have long said is I want the conservative movement to compete in the marketplace of ideas. We absolutely disagree with the progressive left's agenda for this country. And it is absolutely the right thing to do to try to oppose that as much as we can. But it's not just because they're wrong. It's because we believe we've got a better plan. And so in the problem, and maybe, John, we can jump ahead to a couple of the other points that you had. We can't lose sight of the policies. We're having a debate over personalities and the brand. We need to be ready and well-armed to compete with our policies. And because we saw it during the Trump administration, whatever you think of Donald Trump, those policies worked. And we need to be ready and willing to proclaim that. And it's absolutely working at the state level. And I still believe that states lead the way, and maybe that's the missing piece. How do we tell the rest of the country, hey, look, it's working here. It's working in Florida. It's working in Ohio. Or pick your Texas, pick your well-run state. How do we get that to translate so that the people of California, New York, or Illinois, or even states like Nevada and Arizona, how do we get them to understand that this type of governance works? And how do we get them to be comfortable voting for the people that are standing behind that brand? So I know you had a couple other thoughts on that, John. I'll let you pick up on that.
No, I think those are good points because if you look at, for example, Arizona, I believe they called that last night for Katie Hobbs, who defeated Carrie Lake. And Carrie Lake ran a very good campaign. And, of course, Blake Masters also lost by... And so I think what's and it's hard to it's probably state specific, but one thing that is really troubling me is what is the political culture out there? And I think in Iowa we know that the political culture in Iowa is moving more conservative, and we're seeing this with, for example, our election results. But it just, for example, Arizona really troubles me because their governor, Republican Governor Doug Ducey, has done some great policies. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's done some great things on taxes, on regulation, on a whole host of issues on school choice. And you have a major problem with the border, and yet voters in Arizona decided to go for 2 progressives. Now, I'm forgetting the name of the astronaut, Kelly.
Mm-hmm. Mark Kelly.
I mean, he certainly has, kind of has a reputation of maybe being a centrist, but he isn't. And so I think the political culture nationally is still very divided between, if you want to call it Republican conservative versus progressive liberal. And I think we saw that in a lot of these races where they're very close.
It's hard to do too much of analysis on what happens in another state because you're not there. You don't get the full spectrum of what those campaigns are being litigated on. In Iowa, when a voter went to the poll and were faced with that Republican versus Democrat choice, that was a Kim Reynolds decision. And she has set herself out. These are the policies that I advocate for, that I've been successful on, and you know what you're getting. And that brand is led by Kim Reynolds. In Florida, it is a Ron DeSantis brand. He is the standard bearer for Republicans in Florida. And I think that's the case in other states as well, where a governor can really lead the way. I wonder if in some of these other states that Blake Masters or Adam Laxalt or Dr. Oz, that's almost a proxy for a Biden-Trump choice, which is an altogether different question.
And the left, I think, certainly would have framed it up that way or tried to.
Absolutely. And sometimes fairly and sometimes unfairly. But it's still the reality that some of these candidates did not have their own brand and did not communicate what they wanted to do differently, coming back to that policy decision. So there's going to be a very, very robust debate in Republican and conservative circles about the path forward, because this election is not what folks thought, at least around the country. I think we should be encouraged of what's going on in Iowa. But, I got a text message from my wife this morning who's grocery shopping. And it's like, good grief, the bill. And yet the frustration that Americans didn't seem to want to reverse course on that. And it just doesn't add up why they can't see through that. So we've got to figure out how we communicate this to Americans that we have a better way. So to that point, I want to pivot here, gentlemen, to a piece that was put forth in this Sunday's Des Moines Register by the Des Moines Register editorial board about what the path forward should be for Republicans in Iowa.
When I hear Des Moines Register editorial board, I think there's a group of people that absolutely have their finger on the pulse of Iowans.
Well,
and does my sarcasm translate on the podcast? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that's exactly right. So their headline is, will Iowa's red state government serve the people or a platform? So the assumption is that pursuing the policies that they campaigned on and were elected by wide majorities to serve on would somehow not be the path forward. Is that these folks were elected to be conservatives, but really they ought to instead govern as liberals, I guess is the assumption. And that any effort to actually show some fidelity to the voters that elected them would be somehow wrong. And that kind of got under my skin a little bit. They really go to great lengths to go after Attorney General-elect Brenna Byrd, assuming that her agenda will be political grandstanding lawsuits and headline-grabbing lawsuits. And she hasn't even been certified the winner yet.
Wait, I want to go back to their headline grabber. I've still got it down there, actually.
Yeah.
Miller has 16-point lead in Attorney General race. Nice headline grab there, Des Moines Register.
They tried their best. But if the accusation is that these Republican leaders are only interested in partisan wins, it seems to me that attacking them for it before they've even been sworn into office or having headlines like that, talk about headline grabbing, it seems to me that that's actually the partisan activity. So, and my thought is Governor Reynolds, Brenna Bird, Jack Whitver, Pat Grassley, they have been given a mandate. Iowa voters have said, yes, thank you, more of that, please. They would not be doing their jobs right. It would be a dereliction of the duty they have to their voters to not continue to pursue a conservative agenda in Iowa.
Those lawmakers you just named have all served multiple terms. So they've had,
yes,
they've had multiple terms of their record they can run on, and they have. In other words, they've told you what they did. In their campaign material, they have told us what they plan to do, and they have done that.
Yeah.
We expect that to continue. And I guess my point is, voters know what they're getting with all of those lawmakers and have said, yes, please continue to do that. So you're right. It would be a slap in the face to voters to ignore what they've done and what they've campaigned on, and then just turn and try to govern in the way that the Des Moines Register thinks would be best.
Right. Governor Reynolds, since she became governor, has signed into law 3 major income tax bills, has campaigned twice in 2018 and 2022 as tax policy being one of the core messages of her campaign. And yet the register even says that, well, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't do that. Iowans were fully informed on what they were getting when they elected Kim Reynolds by 19 points in this election.
Seems like they want more of it.
So just because these voters don't want to subscribe to the Register editorial board's preferred policy agenda,
or subscribe to the Register, period, somehow means that they are only serving partisan interests. Well, to frame it that way is borderline offensive. But maybe it's only partisan because you don't like it. Maybe it's not partisan. Maybe that's what Iowans want. Because it wasn't just Republicans that elected Kim Reynolds and Brenna Bird and these big Republican majorities. So a whole lot of other Iowans that don't have an R after on their voter registration card that said, yes, please, more of that.
And I think that editorial brought up just the tired arguments that the Register has made multiple times, as well as those on the left, that the tax cuts are going to lead to a budget crisis. They're going to favor the wealthy, and that the Republicans and Governor Reynolds are declaring war on public education. These are all tired arguments. And so, look at the current fiscal house that I was in. We have, this is what, the third year we have a budget surplus that's even bigger, $1.9 billion. We have, the reserves are full. We have close to $2 billion in the taxpayer relief fund. The budget has been handled very responsibly in what would consider to be some shaky, uncertain economic times nationally with inflation, and look at education. I mean, this governor has not harmed education at all. The legislature has continued to fund public education. They've continued to offer opportunities for choice. They've tore down barriers to open enrollment. And one thing too is that Governor Reynolds, I think one thing that was really clear is when she was, I think, being interviewed on KCCI, Channel 8 News, and she read one of those offensive, controversial books.
Yep.
And she's standing with parents who are concerned about what's going on in their schools, and the Iowans responded to that. They see that the economy has been handled well. They see that Governor Reynolds is fighting against this woke agenda, and the Register, I think, is just out of touch.
The bad part is we keep saying the Register, and the reality is there's a number of the reporters who do a good job of trying to talk to Iowans, of trying to tell the stories, of trying to cover what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? They're trying.
I agree with that.
They're trying.
That's an important point.
They're trying to report the news, and they do a good job. They are. A number of the reporters are resources for us to see what they're writing.
Yeah. But it's, the editorial, their philosophy is just, again, I would say just dead end progressivism that is just, if the progressive agenda works, if that editorial is correct, then Pritzker is doing a great job, Walz is doing a great job, Newsom's doing a great job. Those states are disasters. And so, the Iowans rejected that model. They rejected the blue state model when they reelected Reynolds by a landslide.
And that's really the broader point, John, that I want to come back to is that you started us off with, is that state policy leading the way. And I think this piece, in our reaction to it, look, I have a great deal of confidence that Governor Reynolds, Leader Whitver, and Speaker Grassley aren't going to be governing based on what appears on the editorial pages of the Des Moines Register. But it does frame this decision point of what states need to do. And as you say, John, and I'm thankful I finally got you to giggle once before the end of the episode here, is that the solution is to do what red states are doing and doing successfully, and not listening to those voices that are trying to get in the way. Keep doing what you're doing because it's working.
Listen to the people who just overwhelmingly reelected you to those jobs.
Yep. They knew what they were getting. They weren't uninformed. They weren't wrong. They knew exactly what they're getting when they elected these leaders. So that's what I have to say on all that for today, gentlemen. So with that having been said, thank you all for joining us.
I just want to say one more thing.
John's got one more good point.
And I know we're running out of time, but this is maybe a topic.
Time for one more nugget of wisdom, John.
This will be a topic for maybe the next program. But
tease. This might be our first tease.
Hey, excellent.
Sometime today, it appears that former President Trump may make an announcement about running in 2024.
Okay,
I think that's going to be if he announces, that's going to be a huge story today, and it's going to create it's already creating a bunch of discussion.
Is that the right timing, John?
I think it is. I think whether or not it is, I think President Trump is going to basically put a stake in the ground and start, if he announces for re-election. And I know a lot of people are saying don't do it because we still have the runoff in Georgia with Herschel Walker and Warnock. But I think, there is going to be a big debate within the Republican Party over what direction the party goes. Will it continue with Trump? Will it continue with DeSantis? Will it be a populist conservative direction, or does it go back to sort of a more establishment of?
Are you ruling the Mitt Romney branch of the party out of leadership?
I would like to see that branch completely thrown out.
Okay,
but I think it's still going to be a factor within the party, and I think there could be a possible civil war within Republican ranks because I still think Donald Trump has a lot to contribute to the Republican Party. I think right now he is a voice for national conservatism, which from my standpoint, I think is the direction the party needs to move in. I don't know. You guys may disagree with that, but so I think, I think in Ohio, J.D. Vance demonstrated that conservative populism is working.
It is. And I believe, I'm with you, John, I believe that is the foundation for the path forward. And I guess I won't take a position on timing or yes or no on any of that right now. But I do agree with you as well that there is a big, broad conversation that needs to happen both about the policy direction of the Republican Party and the conservative movement and who are the appropriate leaders to carry that forward. And because the stakes are just too high. And my personal belief is that we need to continue with these policies that we know work, that I think we all collectively agree with. No one agrees on 100% of everything. But who are going to be the leaders that can advance that agenda? And there's no question that the Trump presidency was successful in advancing many of those policies. And is that the path forward again in 2024? There's a lot of people asking that question out there today. And maybe let's just get on with it and have that debate and figure out where the conservative movement, the Republican Party stands. But you're right about one thing, John, is that can't think of any figure in American politics in my lifetime that can dominate a news cycle or the news in general than Donald Trump.
And I still think Trump is popular with grassroots Americans. I think they still see him as a champion for their interests, and I think that's going to be a huge factor.
And if you haven't found out, part of that can be explained by Dave Chappelle. I stole your thunder. But if you haven't, go back and check the Dave Chappelle monologue. Maybe not the more controversial parts of it, but certainly he frames up part of what, and he does it in his own unique way with comedy. But really, what part of what average Americans can identify with it.
Well,
The system is in large part broken.
Yeah,
and it is not working for Americans. And I think people of both parties can fully appreciate that. And Donald Trump, love him or hate him, was a voice for that system is broken.
Yeah.
And that resonated with a lot of Americans.
Drain the swamp.
Drain the swamp. Now, I don't know how much it got drained, but that message resonated.
Yeah. And just quickly, I remember one time when I think, Chris, you were hosting one of the ITR meetings around the state, and there was an older gentleman that got up in the room and said, the only politician that has ever fought for me is Donald Trump. And that just, that really spoke volumes, I think.
And again, the leaders that can connect with Americans. Here's what I want. I want a leader that can take this agenda, communicate it to Americans, and have them believe in it, and advance that cause, which is freedom, it is economic prosperity, it is the cultural values that I still believe resonate with the majority of Americans, and take that and not just win elections, but advance that idea. And so that's what I'm looking for.
I agree.
As we debate these choices. So can I sign off now, John?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Like and subscribe. Give us a good review. Share it with your friends and all that good stuff. And we will try and see if John can remember to actually bring in the packages for unboxing next time. So with that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.